The following presentation was recorded live at CALLERLAB's 20th Annual Convention. This is tape number 26, Formation Management.
On Formation Management, my name is John Kaufenthaler. I'm the moderator for this. I have two panelists with me this afternoon. On my left is Mike Jacobs. Mike has been dancing for about 31 years and calling for 22 of them. He joined CALLERLAB in 1976. He's called in 38 states, as well as Germany, Canada, and Sweden. He has previously served as the chairman of the Advanced Quarterly Selection Committee. He's been chairman of both Advanced Teaching Order Subcommittees and is currently chairman of the Membership Committee. Our other panelist is Al Stevens, who comes from Dermersheim near Karlsruhe in Germany. He's had 35 years of calling. He is retired from the Air Force, not quite old enough for Social Security, but probably double-dipping in some other way. He is the chairman of the Overseas Advisory Committee, serves as a member of the CALLERLAB Board of Governors. He is an accredited caller coach, and he has received the Golden Achievement Award from the European Callers and Teachers Association. Would you please give a welcome to our panelists? Our session this afternoon with the handouts is dealing with the formation management. One of the things about formation management which becomes critical is the fact that sometimes we will use terms that you may or may not be familiar with. So we have given you some handouts which provide definitions. We will be using the terms phaser, F-A-S-R, standing for formation, arrangement, sequence, and relationship. And that has become the common language of square dance calling today. You will also find on there a sheet called Analyzing a Call, and that single document is perhaps the best resource that you have to understand how to move people. Let me urge you that if you have not been to a caller school that uses this as one of their handouts, pick up a clean copy when you leave here, because there probably will be some extras. And when you go home, make 200 or 300 sheets of that. And then on each sheet, what you should do is to write down the name of every call that you plan to use. And without looking at a reference, see if you can put down an accurate description of the definition, which would include the starting formation, the allowable starting formation, the action that takes place, the ending formations, depending upon where it starts, the timing and the styling and the other things. Which hand is needed? Is it a no-hands call? Is it a sex-determinant call? What is the effect of the call? What are good calls to precede it and good calls to follow it? Because all of us can do a workshop on a walk and dodge. But if you say, if I do a walk and dodge followed by a wheel and deal, what happens? If I'm looking at two of the people, it's smooth. What about the other half of the line? It's the pits, isn't it? So you cannot ignore the other factors of good choreography, smooth dancing, timing, and several of the other aspects. So formation management doesn't deal in a vacuum. Programming is a function of, or formation management is a part of programming, in that you may decide that you want to program a dance to give them variations in lines, variations in waves, or any of the other formations and arrangements that are appropriate. You will see in the handout material that we advise you that there are 6 and only 6 arrangements of each formation that you may choose to use. Probably one of the things which is surprising to people who teach callers is that as you begin to make a lecture or demonstration kind of thing, and you tell a caller to create a given setup, a given phaser, they'll say, that's great, but how do I get them into a two-face line? Can you do that on demand? Can you create a line with boys on the left end of the line, girls on the right facing? How do you create a wave with the boys facing in, the girls facing out? Some of those things may seem very simple to you, but to others, they're afraid to ask because they may feel that it shows that they don't know what they're doing as callers. So our purpose today, among other things, is going to be, if you have questions, please ask them. Because maybe there's somebody else out there that doesn't understand how to get them into that formation as well. Sometimes you will go to a caller school and they'll give you a flashcard. And you'll be calling away and they'll show you create. a boy-boy, girl-girl diamond, or create a wave with the boys facing in and the girls facing out, or create a wave with the boys holding right hands, girls holding right hands. In facing in is a boy. Whatever that happens to be, that may sound very simple. How many of you have ever gone through that sort of exercise in the color school? Hold up your hands. Some I know have because they've gone through our color school. So that's the point, that you should be able to do that. Please understand that it is no sin if you haven't done that. We had a caller school one time where we asked a caller to do this. He says, I've never done that before. I said, can you do it? He says, I'm not sure. He did a fairly good job, but it was a little bit rough. The timing was bad because he didn't approach his calling with that in mind. He had never dealt consciously with the subject of how to manage the formation. Everything was fine until his wife got on the scene, and we embarrassed her little bear. She was downright hostile because we embarrassed her caller. So that's the other thing that you have to be a little bit aware of if you're conducting training for other people. Don't do something which could possibly embarrass the other callers in the audience. When we talk about managing formations, you need to have the definitions, the formation, obviously the geometric shape, the arrangement, that is the positioning of the boys and girls within that formation, the sequence of the boys and the sequence of the girls. How many different sequences of boys and girls can there be, assuming you're using symmetric choreography? 4 and only 4. The boys can be clockwise, the girls can be clockwise. The boys can be counterclockwise, the girls can be counterclockwise. The boys can be clockwise, the girls counterclockwise. The boys can be counterclockwise, the girls clockwise. There are no other possibilities. And the last of those terms in phaser is relationship, and there are how many relationships that you can have. They're listed there on your definitions chart. And when you do these things, it is really a lot easier than sometimes we seem to think that it is. And the reason for that, of course, is how many of those definitions can you indeed get? How many can you have as far as the relationships? There are 8. Now, when you do some things with choreography, which is other than symmetric, you're going to get into different ball games, and we're not going to try to get into that today. We're going to deal only with symmetric choreography. And to talk about this subject, we have another couple of handouts there that deal with the degree of difficulty. And how many of you went to that session this morning on degree of difficulty? Can we have a show of hands? But that's a part of your formation management. We can make things easy, we can make things hard. And your job as a caller is to let the dancer win. Give him or her variety, not necessarily complexity. And to talk about this first, Mr. Mike Jacobs.
Yeah, thank you, John. First, I want to take an overview of what we're going to be doing here, at least for my segment. I'm going to be looking at 2 different categories of things. One is happening before you get to the dance. The other is happening at the dance. And first off, to talk about what we're happening before the dance is the job that you need to do in pre-programming a dance. All callers, particularly those who cite in one form or another, tend to abhor preparation work for calling hash. Yet they will spend hours working in the proper styling or on the proper styling for a singing call. But hash represents the vast majority of your dancer's career dance time. Lessons, workshops, etc. Even the majority of a normal dance. Ask any beginner in lessons the part he or she dreads the most, and it's the singing call, because of the timing constraints that are demanded. With this in mind, we owe the dancers some amount of time planning the hash that we're about to call that particular night. Now, I'm not talking about an intricate, ritualized, and flexible routine, but a guideline that can focus you individually for an evening. You can create your own guideline with these questions in mind. A, number of tips I plan on calling a dance. Obviously, that's controlled by the length of time the dance is. So obviously a 2-hour dance will be a shorter number of tips than a 3-hour dance or a 2.5-hour dance, as well as whether you're in the type format that takes a lot of breaks, short breaks, and so forth, rounds in the program. Second, the overall dance effect. That is subtitled start slow and build constantly, or you can build to a certain point in the middle of the dance and back off with its intricacy. That depends upon your individual taste and the demands that you want to put upon the dancers that are coming to you there. But that's a question you have to ask yourself as you're pre-programming your dance. C, calls you wish to concentrate on for the evening. D, any call that you plan to workshop. E, formations in which you want to use those calls. F, a variety of calls that set up the applicable formations in which you wish to pursue these calls. And G, arrangements of dancers to best approach these calls to maximize dancer success. And that's just a short guideline. It's a matter of answering questions in a numerical, specific way that has certain names and certain things you want to do. It doesn't ask you to philosophize. It doesn't ask you to come up with intricate solutions. It asks you to come up with certain small questions that you can prepare yourself on a dance beforehand. Now, these are just examples of topics that can be covered in the prep time before a dance. But once you have created your own outline, one you can become familiar with, it will only take a matter of minutes for you to fill in these gaps and focus your thoughts upon your upcoming dance. The second aspect is what occurs after you get to a dance. Standard has become an unfortunate term. We associate standard with successful, and therefore this becomes the meat and potatoes of our dance, and to some degree it should be. But don't confuse standard with the most doable position. Dancer success with any given call is his ability to recognize the command word as part of his vocabulary. That is, identify his or her relationship to the command word and execute that command in a comfortable, pleasing fashion. Analyzing what you may consider the most difficult aspect of the call usually falls into one of four formats. It is either A, in the starting formation of the call, that is, that's the most difficult place to perform the call from. B, a critical juncture in the dancing of that particular call. C, the ending formation is the hard part to achieve. Or D, the call previous to the command is what complicates the call action. Those are the four aspects in which to analyze the formation in which you're going to try to call the particular call you're choosing from. I always analyze these four areas with the idea of finding the most clueable position. If you were with me this morning, you notice that I talked about the word clue, not cue. Clueable, not cueable. Too often we obstruct our dancers' ability to dance to the music, to learn the calls, to hear other commands, or even we lead them astray by overdoing cueing. I found that out again this weekend. If you weren't with us this morning again, I got into a situation where I had the best of ideas in mind of helping dancers through a position. And the word that I gave led them completely astray the other way. I deactivated half of my floor just by telling the girls they were about to work with the left hand, and suddenly the boys dropped dead as far as they were concerned. They stopped dancing. Unfortunately, it was a command word that needed to be danced by everybody. And I got in the way of the dancer's ability to dance. Cluing provides casual information in a gentle, leading manner. It can reinforce the tentative dancer and provide reassurance to an experienced dancer, and at the same time not interfere with the right of a dancer performing well to do what he came to do, dance, not to listen to you. Now, let's look at those four situations I talked about. A, I talked about the starting formation being the hard area of the call. Peel off, for instance. If you wanted to approach peel off from a right or left hand column as opposed to a completed double pass-through, you're going to ask for a degree of sophistication from the dancer more stringent than its normal starting position. Where do I set that up from? Well, I probably will determine that it's easier for dancers to go to their right than to go to their left. So then obviously, since they turn away from the center, I have to set up a left-hand column, then a right-hand column, because that way their movement will be to the right. I feel if I get dancers in a position where their ending position is going to be someplace I need to cue towards, then my setup then needs to be where I have a boy in the lead and the girl in the end, because then, or a boy in the lead and the girl trailing, so that when I complete the peel off, I'm there to help them by reminding them the boys are on the end of the line, the girls are in the center of the line. So the starting position to me is the demand factor there, that I can help, that they can most easily recognize what they're doing. On the B example, there's a critical juncture in the movement of the motion of the call that I consider to be the hard part and the hard aspect. You take a command like load the boat. Load the boat normally is, to my analysis, is a hard function for the centers as opposed to the ends. The ends tend to be rather carefree as they move around the outside, and they eventually get to the point in time where they need to be. The centers, however, follow a variety of paths in the middle. If I isolate a sex in the middle and then try to help them function as they perform the command, then that's where I consider the critical juncture in helping the call be performed. It's the formation that I set up ahead of time that ensures dancer success by just general reminders on what they're doing. But correspondingly, if I set up something more intricate like an inverted line to call load the boat from, then my analysis from seeing dancers perform is that the end position is the hard part. They tend to want to make it feel normal the way it ends, and it doesn't end normally. So that juncture is where I start to help those people. It's the ends that I consider to have the hard part and not the centers. The ending formation. Single circle 3/4 to a wave. Well, 3/4 is probably one of the hardest things to achieve in the course of dancing. It involves a lot of directional change. So if you ask dancers to single circle 3/4 to a wave, you'll be prepared for them to stop too short. So the way I maximize their dance for performance is that I set it up so that one sex will be in the middle at the conclusion and one sex on the end. And I can remind them they have to go far enough to put that particular sex into the middle. So I've achieved their dance of success by analyzing the hardest part of the call being the finishing position, and therefore I'm prepared before. Finally, the flow of the previous call. And the best example I could come up with was really a call that we had on the plus list a long time ago and then got inherited by the advanced program. And that's swap around. Swap around in and of itself was not that bad a call. The problem is the material that came before it. The dancer flow. It's debatable. The dancer flow was really what made that call successful, or what made that call a bomb. And the only thing that could help was the real flow in to be able to perform the call correctly. Part of our problem, the controversy they face us, is that there were very legitimate viewpoints both ways on what constituted good flow before the call. And I think that's one reason why it left the plus list and the plus activity. Most important, when attempting to accomplish the unusual, try to make the situation as accessible as possible. If, for instance, you feel a need to coordinate from a different position other than the standard right-hand columns, try it from a same-sex column situation. Why is that more advantageous? Well, first off, it ends in same-sex two-face lines. So you have an advantage by being able to identify people coming together at the conclusion of the call. And most importantly, secondly, only 4 of the dancers are dancing an unfamiliar position. Only 4 of the dancers are actually dancing sashayed. The other 4 are actually dancing situations that are normal feeling for them. Ultimately, left and half sashayed should be the last issues approached, and not half sashayed as your first alternative to dancing in a different position. And not only should they be approached separate, or rather approached last, they need to be approached separately. Left and half sashayed are probably the worst possible combination to get into together. In summary, anything that separates flow from formation and from timing is like separating the chicken from the egg. Formation is an aspect of the total picture. It's one part of the elephant, and we need to look at that whole beast as one whole, but this is concentrating on it. To kind of paraphrase Professor Harold Hill in The Music Man, he talks about when he's the pool being the danger to River City community, that it takes judgment, brains, and ability to play a frontline game, but any fool can take and shove a ball in the pocket. It takes judgment, brains, and ability to call a successful dance experience. Any fool can call a sequence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. When Mike outlined these aspects, it's interesting to note sometimes when people are calling, they have no idea of the choreographic consequences of a given call. they are not aware of the formation that will result as a result of having called that particular call. Sight calling is not a matter of calling something and say, oh, is that where you are? That's not what we're talking about. Anybody can resolve the square. That's the Mickey Mouse part. That's the easy part. But it's what you do before you start to do your resolution process that you need to have this critical awareness of the formation, the critical awareness of what formations will be created, how did you get into them, but perhaps more importantly, and let's think about this word, how do you normalize it? By normalizing, we mean to create the formation which has the girl and the boys right. What feels right to the dancer? One of the aspects of the degree of difficulty is what feels right. And when Mike was talking about left-handed formations, many dancers feel a bit uncomfortable when they're in left-handed stuff. Many dancers feel uncomfortable when they have the boys leading when it's normally the girls in the lead. But if the resulting formation is normal, then dancers have the feeling, we must have done it right. So that's an important consideration, that as you're looking at these things that Mike talked about, remember what the effect of the call is going to be on creating the formation, or in how do you normalize it. And there are a whole bunch of things that we may get into a little later on as to the kinds of formations that you will see out there that are other than the standard or normal arrangement, and the techniques that you can use to normalize them very readily. Our next panelist is going to be Mr. Al Stevens, who is from Deutschland über alles.
That sounds like a planetarium term. Deutschland über alles. When Mike was talking about his analogy with Q and adding the L to the term Q to make it cluing, I sat here and jotted down, next time I go to Japan, they have lots of loud dance clues. Formation management is, as we've been talking about, is the managing of formations. And John just jogged my memory. I wrote down a very quick four-letter word that starts with F. It's called fish. In my schools, I like to equate what we do as callers as looking at a fish. We have on one side a term that we use quite readily as a get-in. It's a module of calls that takes us from a static square to some known position from which to start. I equate that, I call that the head of our fish. And on the other side is the obvious get-out, which could either be the successful resolution process to an Alaman left or a right and left grand, or the ever-gaining popular your home get-out. So we have the get-in, which is the module that brings us to a starting formation from a static square, and we have the get-out, which takes us from some place that we're sure of back to our home position somehow. It's a vehicle, but what lies between the get-in and the get-out is the fillet. That's the fillet. That's where the experience of and the sensation of dance is embedded. And this is how, if we're aware of the fact that we have a get-in, we know we're going to get out sometime. But in the middle, where that fillet should lie, we should concentrate on improving our dance experience by being aware of this. One of the vehicles that we can use is to be fully aware of the formations that we have, how to get into and out of and create these formations at will. In our schools, we have a chart that it's called our formation awareness, formation arrangement chart. That I believe, is this one of the handouts, John? It's the one with the one that's stapled. Okay, it's very briefly, it's a conglomeration of popular calls that are broken down into the only six arrangements. And we alluded that an arrangement was the physical placement of dancers within each formation. And there are only 6 of them. However, if you work with 10 calls and you have 6 different arrangements, then in reality you have 60 different formation arrangements to work with. Now that's mind-boggling to quite a few people. It was mind-boggling for me when I first arrived in Europe, where the entire scene is much different than I've seen anywhere else in my 35 years of calling. I won't draw parallels, I don't wish to. We have a lot more time. We're not under any pressure to do something and do it now. We want that product yesterday, like my colonel used to say. I want that letter yesterday, Al. We're not under any obligation to finish anything just for the sake of finishing it. We are allowed to do our classes the way we see fit. So therefore, without this added pressure, we feel as if we have a lot more time to dedicate to exploring some of the different dancer arrangements from even the more popular formations, and then trying to create some of the other formations that are not maybe as popular, but are existent. One thought comes to mind very quickly. This was, I'm going to digress to around 1978. In the mid to late 70s, the offset formations had not quite been invented yet. They had been invented, they were there, but they were not being used as common practice in the everyday scene. And at that particular point in time, there was a call on there was a very popular call being used by a lot of traveling callers called Extend the Tag. And I picked up on Extend the Tag, and I had been using it traveling from the East Coast to the West Coast. I was in Alabama doing a dance with Mac Letson, as a matter of fact. And we had in the course of the dance, I said, heads past the ocean. And before I could say extend the tag, my mouth became engaged and said, men. Then I said, extend. And at that period in time, I was shocked. I had created, without thought, a formation and an arrangement that I was totally, it boggled my mind. When I said 4 men extend, immediately I had 2 offset boxes of 4. And not only was I shocked, but the 45 squares of people that were out there were saying,
and all the callers in the room were saying, I wonder how he's going to get out of this.
Mac was in one of my pilot squares. He just kept looking over his shoulder, smiling. Well, in order to bide time, one of the miraculous things that we have is this computer upstairs that works very quickly sometime, and it started sending a signal that said, do something, dummy. So I said, okay, in your box of 4, that's a little catty corner, can you see your own box of 4? If the people in the middle of the ocean wave would drop hands, you could see you. In your box of 4, circulate. So then I said, this is cool. I could do this all day. A signal came back, said I could do this all day. And it's not going to change the fact that but it's going to buy it a lot of time. It's going to buy me a lot of time. The minute I said circulate once within your box, I found an ocean wave, same sex, across the center. Well, being a competent site resolver, I didn't let that bother me. I now have 2 vehicles to play with. Well, let me see. Within your ocean wave, swing through. Now let's go back to the box, because I don't want them to know that I'm lost. So, okay, within your box of 4, let's circulate again. And they did, and I did this a few times, and then all of a sudden something said to me, another, try this. Within your box of 4, do a walk and dodge. And the minute I said that, I noticed that all of the men miraculously came towards the center of the formation. Now, we had one couple looking out, we had a standard two-face line, and we had another couple on this end looking out. But the thing that struck me as a visual sight resolver was the fact that I had men in the center, towards the center of the formation, and I very quickly picked up on that, and I said, now, with the men acting as a pivot, everybody wheel and deal. And they flopped right into a double pass-through formation. And Mac looked at me, and he smiled. He said, "You silver-tongued devil." He came up later, thought that was pre-planned, but it wasn't.
Actually, he said, "You lucky."
But we are being taped. The point that I'm trying to make is I was not aware of the choreographic consequence of what I had said prior to saying. It was a slip of the tongue. Men, extend. Instead of everybody extend your tag, I just said men, extend, and away we went. But I did have the tools and the experience to tap dance out of this particular situation. I did not have full control of my particular formation, or I didn't know how to manage the mess that I got myself into. But I did manage to wiggle out of it with some sort of degree of success. The dancers, for all intents and purposes, didn't falter. They got out of it well. And the one of the things that we can use in our ability to create choreography and to transform one formation into another, to transition from one formation to another, the use of filler words. And I'm sure, we could probably give hundreds of examples of filler words, how to help somebody through a very difficult stage. The poor dancer that's never seen a right and left through would be absolutely lost if you just explained it and then called it the first time, do a right and left through. Don't we all want to sit there and help and say, do a right and left through, give a right pull by, boy reach out, and courtesy turn that lovely gal next to you. We do a lot of helping, assisting with filler words. But we must be very, very careful, because it's very easy to change filler words into killer words if you overuse filler words. If you use too many filler words, they become killer words, because now they start affecting your timing, your body flow sometimes. So when filler words become killer words, time to ease off and let them go. Agree? Whew. Glad. We have a lot of time to play with degree of difficulty. We are constantly aware in our patter presentations. The formula for sight resolution is a learned formula. A plus B equals C. Everybody understands that. When we're moving dancers, transitioning from one formation to another, we're not as concerned with the last two facets of phaser as we are when we're starting to resolve. When we finally make a determination, I want to start my resolution process. That's when we become more aware of relationship and sequence. But we're constantly aware. If we're not, we should be aware of formations and arrangements at all times while we're moving dancers. One of the training aids that I'm pursuing now, and I hope to have it done before John comes over and does his school, is a series of cards, like a deck of normal playing cards. And what I would like to see done is to have a series of cards manufactured with each one of these formations and arrangements on a separate card for the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, for the 10 more popular calls, formations rather. That would give me 60 cards, 60. I would have a deck of 60 cards. And one of the training aids that I would like to see available at caller schools is to have a deck of these cards, shuffle them, put them down next to your turntable, face down, turn one card up. And if that card says I want a number 3 facing line, I should be able to try to get to that formation. It doesn't matter if it takes me 3/4 of the tip to get there. As long as I can arrange and get to that particular formation and arrangement, once I get there, flip another card over, go to that formation and arrangement, and just continue the process in 1.5 times through the pad of record. Keep track of how many cards how many formations and arrangements that you have actually achieved, and then try to better it next time. Sure.
One thing when he's talking about a number 3 line, you do not have to know what the symbolic notation is. What you would need to know if you're dealing with facing lines. Do I have a boy, girl, boy, girl? Do I have a half shade, girl, boy, girl, boy? Do I have boys together on the left, girls on the right, boys on the right, girls on the left? Do I have boys in the middle, girls on the end, or do I have boys on the end and girls in the middle? The pictorial is what is important, not the numbering sequence. I could care less whether you know what a number 1 line is, a number 3 line, or something else, but I want you to be able to create all 6 of those line arrangements at will or upon call.
Correct. If you look at the formation arrangement chart, a number 3 facing line calls for the boys to be on the end, the girls to be in the center. That is what I would place on the card. It's just the picture of the physical placement of 4 people within that facing line formation. That's what I would try to achieve while I were calling. And this is a training aid that we feel is very, very valuable, and we endorse this idea, and I'm pursuing trying to get somebody to market this, and if they can, I'll let you know. I have flashcards also, but I want something that I can sell to the students so that they can buy them and take them home and shuffle them. Mike mentioned something about 3/4 movements being difficult, circling 3/4. To draw just a parallel of how 2 different geographical areas are different, in an area where I'm working, we have an awful lot of time. Cal Golden told me many, many years ago that over 80% of the calls on the mainstream list alone involve either a turning motion or an arm turn of 1/4, 1/2, or 3/4. He brought that to light in a caller school. And I took off on that subject, and I said to myself, my God, if over 80% of what I am teaching involves some sort of a turn, a fractional turn, then it would behoove me to try to instill as early as I can in my students, my dancers in a beginner class, the importance of a fraction. So I start from the very, very first day when we're getting the large circle and everybody join hands. You teach them the mechanics of circling left, circling right. After you teach them how to do an Alaman left and come back to your partner. If they're facing their partner, I start right there. I don't have them do-sa-do. I'll have them step up and touch right hands so that you become shoulder to shoulder almost. And I impress upon them at this time, you have a 2-hand star with the boys on the inside of the circle, the girls on the outside. Now what I would like for you to do is to turn that star exactly halfway. Now boys, I want you to move up to the girl in front of you. Form the right-hand star with her, turn that star 1/2. The boys are now back in the center, the girls are on the end. Girls, move up to the guy in front of you, and I'm right back to nothing. From there, I can start, turn that star a 1/2 and a 1/4 more, so that we now have the boys facing in, the girls facing out. Now, if I tell the girls to turn around, I'm not concerned whether they turn towards their partner and have their shoulders and arms and proper and everything. I just want them to turn their bodies 180 degrees to face back the center of the circle. But we start the very first day with exposing and impressing the importance of fractions right from the very first day. We carry this as we teach our class. We carry this all the way through. And by the time we get to where we can actually physically use a star or a fraction, half, quarter, 3/4, they further understand what the fractions mean. Well, so we start on the very first day. We have a lot more time to play with these little things, these little insignificant things that would not apply probably anywhere else. Well, one of the beautiful things about my particular career is in the last 35 years, I spent 21 of them in the Air Force, of which 14 were spent outside of North America. I became a successful caller within North America, and I have also attained a certain degree of competence outside of North America. But the most important thing, I was telling another panel earlier in the yesterday, I believe, I was talking to Jerry Story, who has a very successful program in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. I could not move into his area with the program that I currently have and become successful doing what I'm doing now. I've had to learn to adapt, to walk into an area, very quietly put my finger on the pulse, find out what was happening, and then very slowly try to figure out what I could do to lend to the success and the growth of the activity within that area. Boy, is that projection? I have been exposed to quite a few different areas of the world, and I think that's probably made me a more versatile person. It's made me more aware of what we can do with formations and arrangements where I'm at now than ever before. And I'm tasting it, and I'm not saying that I do more with what is to be done, but I'm just much more aware of it now than ever before, probably because Bill Peters stuck a size 9.5 in my backside and pushed me to become a caller coach. Anyhow, you don't want to get into choreography. I'll let you play with choreography. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. One of the things I would like you to do is take this stapled handout and just take a quick look at the formations part of that, which, as we said, was a geometric shape with a facing direction, and see if there are any of those 53 that are listed there that you would not be able to create at will. Just take a moment and see if there's any of those formations that you're not able to create. And if there is one that bothers you, why, shout out the number, and I'm sure we can get Mike or Al to create that for you very quickly. Yeah, I can do that in 3 moves. Any of you have any problem with any of those to do that? Relatively easily. You know, if there's one there that sometimes certain people have never seen how to get into a two-faced line, for instance, and maybe that sounds overly simplistic, but there are callers out there today calling who do not know how to create a two-faced line at will. A right-handed two-faced line. Or how do you create a left-handed column? Then the next thing that I want you to do is take a look at the arrangement charts. That's the one with the squares and circles. And look at the one called facing lines. Part of your formation management that we talk about there would be to determine the relationship between some of these calls. For instance, if you look down at the number 1 and the number 2 facing lines, what one call changes one to the other? Think about that for a moment. Take a look at the number 1 line. It's boys on the left, girls on the right. What single call will change that to a girls... Shut up, Al. We'll change that to a girls on the left and boys on the right. Bend the line. It's overly simplistic. But if you've never had that challenge, it's
awesome responsibility to do that at will while you're calling, keeping in mind good timing, good flow, and smoothness, and no hesitation. Similarly, you will see a relationship between the number 3 and the number 4 line. Now that tells you something about how you approach this idea of managing formations. When we are at caller schools, we sometimes tell the callers, okay, dance me through all 6 lines. And when they're able to do it just like that, it's great. Then we say, oh yeah, by the way, dance me through all 6 lines, but between each different line, put them into a normal ocean wave. So that the degree of difficulty, the degree of complexity gets somewhat greater. But you have a different challenge, but you're getting the idea of managing those formations. Yes?
John struck a very good nerve, and if you know that from facing lines of 4, regardless of what the arrangement is, you have 6 different arrangements within facing lines.
Please turn your tape over at this time for the continuation of the program.
Touch a quarter away from 6 different arrangements for columns. You're only past the ocean away from 6 different arrangements for ocean waves. And with just that limited amount of knowledge, you can did I get fired?
No, but you won't get to eat tonight.
No match. Very good.
But also, the other side of the coin is don't pressure yourself to be able to do that flexibility. If it takes you 2 calls to change from one to the other, then feel free to do it in 2 calls, as long as the 2 calls danced well together, as opposed to trying to force one very quickly down their throat. It stops being dancing when you force it and starts being checker moving.
And I think the thing is, if any of you don't see what we're talking about, let us know. We'll get a square up here, and we'll show you how easy some of this stuff really is. And I don't mean that to demean any of you, but I'm saying is, many times we have never experienced this, particularly those of us who are out in the isolated areas. And I can assure you that the very few areas in this country are more isolated than Pocono Pines. It's in the boonies.
Dermisine.
But, yeah, Dermisine, same way. What I'm getting at is that, and Mike says the point, don't worry if it takes you 2 calls or 3 calls. But there are other things, as Al has mentioned, you're only a touch a quarter away, you're only a pass the ocean away from a whole 6 of another formation. Recognize also that there are tools, there are calls because of your call analysis sheets that enable you to change from one to another, or enable you to go from a particular kind of line or particular kind of wave to a normal situation, be it a line, wave, column, or what have you. When you're dealing with lines, the use of tag the lines is a very useful tool, isn't it? When you're dealing with waves, the use of a single hinge or split circulates. If you stop to think of a split circulate, what does that accomplish for you in waves? If the same sexes are together, a split circulate will separate same sexes. A single hinge will change the facing directions of the ends and the centers, will it not? And those tools, then, are part of your resources as to what you do and how you manage those variations of the formations. Is it hard to do? Yeah. Is it worthwhile to do? You bet. Does it become easier as you start to work with this and test yourself? Make your own flashcards. You don't have to buy them from Al. You know, we do this sort of thing, and we play with one another when we're doing this sometimes for a couple of reasons. It gets you involved, number one, but more importantly, it also says you can do a lot of this stuff on your own. Make up a series of flashcards. Create a line with the boys in the center and the girls in the middle. Next thing to do, how do you normalize it? Sometimes, you know, you can do it from an in-facing line, but many times it's easier if you do it from an out-facing line. How do you change an in-facing line to an out-facing line? Don't tell me you turn back. I realize you can do that. But what is the common way that we do that? We pass through. And if we're working with tags, we know that if we're going to tag the line and we started with girls in the middle, which way will normalize the couples? Quickly. A left face will normalize the couples. However, having said that, when people pass right shoulders and turn to their left, are the lines straight or are they offset? That also says, without trying to make a big deal over it, whenever you tag the line and face left, follow that by something which will enable them to be in a normalized two-face line or some other formation. You don't want to tag the line face left and bend the line. Follow it with a couple circulator, a Ferris wheel, or something like that. You know the result will be normal. You know the result will dance smoothly, but you put them in what feels right for the dancer. You can do a wheel around. I think that would be a degree of difficulty, perhaps a little bit harder. You call a wheel around, and a lot of them are going to do a wheel and deal because they heard the word wheel and they commit their body and their mind to a wheel around. They'll do it in Germany.
Their sound enhancement program thing hasn't been tuned.
Yeah, that's right. Everybody follow what we're trying to say there? Mike, jump in.
There's three things though that Al talked about that I think that are really crucial to you understanding your dancers. You know, Al, the very first part of his talk talked about 60 different arrangements. The dancers, there are many successful dancers, but many of your dancers learn 60 different calls that all sound like the word swing through. They have learned the 6 different arrangements as 6 different calls. There's a swing through they do that starts with the boys on the end and the girls in the middle. There's a swing through they start with the boys together and the girls together. There's a swing through that starts with the boys in the middle and the girls on the end. Each one of those, to those dancers that learn that way, are different calls. Now, we don't understand that. Many of us learn one rule that applies to a whole bunch of different situations. But my mother is a very good example of a dancer that has learned to dance up into C1, but has a vocabulary that goes from here to this back wall. But the vocabulary has lots of words that sound alike. The positions make it a different call to her. And she learns dancing that way. And you have lots of dancers that are out on your floor learning square dancing that way. When you introduce a rule, it goes right past them. Each one of those is a different event for that person. And once you start to understand that those people learn differently, you have to teach them differently. The same situation when Al talking about introducing fractions at a very early point in time. Math is another language. And it's a language in school. Geometry is part of that and so forth. It's very much part of our square dancing language, but it may be a language that they are equally inept at. When they come in the door and haven't learned to square dance yet, they're inept at that language of square dancing, but they may also be inept at mathematics and or geometry. So assuming that they know a lot about that may be an assumption that's erroneous. You have to give them means by which to understand fractions, relating it to the wall. Reducing a 3/4 turn to a 1/2 and a 1/4 is another way of doing things. But whatever, you may give them a different advantage in learning square dancing by understanding their problems that may not have been your problems when you learned how to square dance.
Sometimes we have to have different ways of teaching the same thing. I'm reminded of a situation where I had a dancer who could not understand what I meant by 3/4. And I was trying to say 270 degrees, 3 walls. Still didn't understand it. I said, what's your profession? He said, I'm an accountant. I said, 0.75. He says, I got it. Well, the point is not to make it a humorous example of it, but rather be able to appeal to your particular group. Be ready to reteach a basic because it feels different. When we teach scoot back, the most common application today is with boys facing in, girls facing out. When we teach follow your neighbor, with or without the spread, similarly that way. But if you go back and you gradually learn these things as they were approached, we all learned scoot back from normal ocean waves with the boys on the end, so it was a mixed sex scoot back. Far more difficult than same sexes going in because we can't give them the clue words or the helper words that Al was talking about to enable them to successfully complete the routine. All that is a part of your formation management. All that is a part of your teaching. You have to remember the other aspects of smooth dancing and timing and forward flow and hand availability. So it's not operating in an isolated situation. And you have to be aware that Mike said it earlier, and some of you may have picked up on it, some may not have. When we are going to introduce a different variation of a given formation or a different move from a different arrangement, we want to try to make that the easiest transition. And if the centers in a load the boat are normal, what they consider to be the normal part, that would say that the second way of teaching a load the boat would be the boys on the right end of the line, the girls on the left. If you can't create that particular facing line arrangement, you're going to have trouble in teaching that, aren't you? So this all ties in with teaching, as well as giving the dancers variety without complexity, giving them variety while giving them winnability. Because it is the dancer who pays the freight in this business. And if we make them fail all the time, guess who loses? We as callers. And that's an important consideration. Now, I've asked Mike and Al at any point in time to jump in on anything that comes in here, but also we would like to have you ask questions, or if you have particular problems that you want to work with, we are being taped. We would like to have you use the rolling mic. We'll have you ask the questions on the tape, and then Mike or Al or I will show you the answer to your question. CALLERLAB's version of Phil Donahue. No, Phil has more hair. It's gray. Any of you?
Mine's getting that way.
What there is of it. That's true.
Well, you have no room to talk.
Yes,
Or maybe you have room to talk.
I have lots of room left up there. Okay, any of you have any questions that you'd like us to address? And any of you who came in late, there are the handouts up here in the front. Please take as many as you like. Any questions at all? Don't be afraid. There's probably somebody else thinking the same question. Yes, right over here, please. State your name, where you're from, and give us your question, sir.
Okay, I'm Phil Hanley from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and I would, myself, it's kind of opening a new bucket of worms for me. It may sound dumb to a lot of these guys that have been at it for a long time, but it is. And I would like to see you set up some of these, like these tags out here in squares and work them. So
Can we get 8 people? I mean, it'd be easier to see for illustrative purposes if we had 4 girls and 4 guys. Can we get a quick square out here, please? 4 girls and 4 guys? It would be most helpful if we did have 4 of each sex. Is there a lady who would cheer too? John Cook is looking for a loose woman. Here she comes. Now, so we have a loose woman or somebody who would be willing to dance with John
Let's try the stage, if we don't mind. Yeah. We've got plenty of room up on the stage.
I think you get up on the stage here, you might be able to see just a little bit better. Thank you very much. Okay, now, when you said opening up a new bucket of worms, I would like to think, sir, that we're opening up new horizons for you. I would rather call it new horizons rather than bucket opportunities. New opportunities.
I think you're right.
Okay, you'll accept that. Now, for purposes of this discussion, we will have the number one couple with their backs to you. Suddenly I see them fighting for position over here. No, there's no problem at all. And no, over there, darling. Don't go too far. Oh, good. This is terrific. All 4 of the gals in this square here are callers. I think we have a rare opportunity for that, too. Thank you, Darcy. Appreciate that. Okay, that's good right there. No, I certainly hope not. Yeah, right. Okay. Size lead right circle to a line of 4, please. Now, this lets you see what arrangement of the lines, facing lines is this. This is the number 1, the 0 line, is it not? The 0 line. Everybody see that? It is the normal boy, girl, boy, girl. This is what we call the normal line of 4. If we were, say, to normalize lines of 4, we would want to get them back to this particular formation and arrangement. If we wanted to create a 1/2 line, right and left through, to establish body flow, and roll away with a half sachet. Now we've created a what kind of line? 1/2 line. Does this say anything else about this line? Is there anything other than the fact that this is a 1/2 line that jumps out at you right away? The center couples are normal in each line. Notice that? The center couples have the boy with the girl on the right. That's defined as a normal partner arrangement. So the centers do a right and left through. Those short naps are marvelous. Centers only roll away with a half sachet. What have I created here? Boys on the right, girls on the left. What is that relationship? Or what is that arrangement? I'm sorry. What is that arrangement? It's a number 2 line. Bend the line.
I wouldn't do it right at that point, but you see now we've switched the boys from the right end of the line to having the boys on the left end of the line. Everybody see how easy that was? Bend the line again, please. And you'd never do a bend the line and bend the line that way. However, this will also work. Pass through and bend the line and bend it again. You see, by doing that bend the line twice after a pass through, it flows and it gives you, in effect, a wheel around, or it does a cast a half, and there's a couple of other terminologies that you could put there, but you have changed from the boys on one end to the boys on the other end. Now let me just digress for a little moment here. What line is this? Number 1 line. Touch a quarter. What column is this? It's a right hand, but what number column is this? Girl, girl, boy, boy. Number 1, isn't it? Isn't that nice to know that what Al said, a touch a quarter from a number 1 line creates a number 1 column? Terrific, isn't it? Yes, everybody trade. And a quarter more, and then backs and facing lines, you see. Thank you, back away. You roll and face. We didn't want to use a roll, but that's okay. Now, we're back in this line with the boys on the left, girls on the right. We have 2 other line arrangements that we want to be able to create at will. And those are with the boys in the center and girls on the end, or the girls in the center, boys on the end. Pass through and wheel and deal, and using mainstream only, outside squeeze into a line of 4. What do I have? I have a number 4 line, where I have boys in the middle, girls on the end. Is the number sequence important to us? No. The visualization of knowing where the dancers will be. Do we see anything else that's unique about this, other than the fact that I have boys in the middle? The couples on the right end of the line are normal. It doesn't mean the others are odd or weird. It means the others are half sachet, just so that you understand that words sometimes mean one thing in one connotation, and sometimes you get yourself in trouble because you've done a verbal exercise that some people may recognize in a different situation. So I could do this. End couples on the diagonal do a right and left through. And just 2 couples would do that. That would be variety that would achieve success. Okay, if I bend the line from here, what arrangement do I get? The girls in the middle, the boys on the end. Does that help you in answer to your question as to how you would set that sort of thing up? Okay, how would I normalize this? Pass through, tag the line all the way through, and face left and freeze. You notice how they are offset unless the boys backed up. They're not quite right. Couples circulate, and they're back to a normal couple arrangement. It's a what kind of formation? It's a 2-faced line, but what particular kind? Left-handed, because the center dancers have left hands being held.
And notice one other thing. They're prepared to promenade. If the floor was not even in a position to recognize the 2-faced line after the tag the line and quarter left action, why not resolve into a promenade and then go ahead and resolve the rest of the square then? They have a rallying point to simply going into a promenade. Everybody recognizes how to promenade, and thus we would get them dancing again, and then we can go ahead and resolve the square after that point in time.
Bend the line, please. Let's assume that for sake of discussion that your task was to create 6 waves. Well, from a line of 4 facing, what's the easiest way to get them into an ocean wave? Beg pardon? Well, somebody said touch a quarter. Touch a quarter is going to create what? What's the effect of a touch a quarter? Makes us into column. What changes lines to waves? Pass the ocean, sure. Pass the ocean, please. Now, for sake of discussion, well, can you all see that that's an ocean wave? I mean, they don't have their backs to you, but I think you can all see that. Watch what happens here. Single hinge. What do we have here? Boys facing in, girls facing out. I don't care what number it is. We have boys in, girls out waves. Scoot back. What have we created? Girls in, boys out. Split circulate. What are we going to create? Same thing as a scoot back, aren't we? We're going to have an effect of doing something of that nature. Single hinge. What do we have here? Boys in the middle, girls on the end. Are same sexes together in each half of the wave? Split circulate. You'll notice that the same sexes come together.
If you want to get out of the same sexes together, there are a couple of ways of doing it. We just called a split circulate, so it probably wouldn't be a good idea to do that one again. Centers trade. Does that help us? What do we got? We got something we saw before, didn't we? Swing through. We got something we see again. Single hinge. Now what do we have? We have a wave with the boys together with the end facing in and boy facing in. Okay? From here, swing through. Double. And we put the boys where the end boy is facing out. So those are the 6 arrangements of the waves. And it's not difficult to get them in and out of them. Okay? So make it look, you start to see that horizon that starts to open up. I'm glad you asked that question. Thank you. Stay up here.
Yes, I need them for a moment. Usually the 6 arrangements fall into one of 3 patterns when you analyze any particular given call. It's either 4 and 2, 3 and 3, or 2, 2 and 2. Now what do I mean by that? Everybody here please do a split circulate. And all the boys run around the girls. Bend the line and pass the ocean. So here's the kosher looking ocean wave, right? Okay. Taking hinges through 4 scenarios here, watch what happens. We're in a normal wave, single hinge. We're now with the boys facing in, girls facing out. Single hinge. Boys are in the middle, the girls are on the end. Single hinge. We got the boys facing out. Single hinge. And we're back to normal again. Everybody do a split circulate. So that was a segment of that arrangement of dancers by applying those hinges sent you through the whole procedure of a group of 4 of the 6 scenarios. Now, single hinge, and we got one aspect from what we had before. Single hinge, and we have the other aspect. That's the 2 segment. So it divides into groups of 4 or 2. And that can go through whole ranges of scenarios. Everybody do a split circulate, and notice what happened to the waves. It turned, put the boys in the middle and the girls in the end and so forth. Split circulate, and we're back in the other scenario. Split circulate, and we're back with the boys in the end, the girls in the middle. That's another grouping of 4 and 2. The 2 aspect, everybody do a single hinge, and we can run them through the other aspect of split circulate. Split circulate here, and we have one sex facing out, one sex facing in. Split circulate, and it's the other way around. So the grouping of 4 and 2 is one way to analyze the setup in order to be able to produce the 6 scenarios, which is extremely helpful when you're trying to teach all the different positions and functioning with the call. Now, the group of 3 and 3, let's all the girls do a U-turn back, okay? The old chestnut that you've danced for years and years of pass-through, wheel and deal, double pass-through, put centers in, cast off, the whole bit, right? Everybody pass through. Wheel and deal. Notice that we started in the normal 0 lines. Double pass-through, put centers in, and cast off 3/4. And the same sex line appeared. Pass through, wheel and deal, we go through the whole routine again. Double pass through, centers in, cast off 3/4. Don't run, fellas. I mean, people, we don't need to. But notice now we've got that line with 1 sashayed, 1 normal. Pass through, wheel and deal, double pass through, put centers in, cast off 3/4, and the normal lines reappeared again. If we had started with everybody sashayed and went through that whole routine process again, the 3 other scenarios would have shown up. So the grouping would have been 3 and 3 to go through all the different aspects.
Let me also jump in here and say, you notice we have not used any terminology that's outside the mainstream. And yet there has been a very large variety that the dancers were able to dance successfully with relative ease. It would have been a lot easier for them to dance if we had music to make it smooth and to go with the other aspects. But I think you can start to see what this opens up for you as a caller. You don't need to rush into the other dance programs that have greater degree of vocabulary or greater complexity. There's lots of variety right here. Yeah, we're going to have Al do a little 3-in-1 lines for us.
I didn't really want to do that, but what I wanted to add to what you had said, again, I deal with a customer that constantly tells me, Al, we want variety. We want a lot of variety, but we want that variety to come from within the program that we're working with. If I call for a mainstream club, they do not want me to, even though they could possibly, if I go to an open dance, and this is under normal conditions, if I go to an open special dance, and I call inadvertently, it's labeled as a mainstream dance, even though there are plus people on the floor. And if I say everybody pass through and do a partner trade and roll, the plus dancers in my backyard will not move. They'll say, that is a plus call. This is a mainstream dance. That's the type of customer that I have to deal with. That's the mentality that I'm in touch with every day. They want variety from within the program. They do not want variety sprinkled from above, like a salt shaker. We'll sprinkle a plus call to make it interesting. They don't want
But before we do too much knocking of American dancers, there are plenty of American dancers that would equally agree with what you just did and felt the very same way.
I understand.
Yeah, and so we learn from each other. Yeah.
I've called the groups that everybody pass the ocean. Let's have all the girls walk and dodge. Yeah. Had to stop and think.
Okay, what is this formation? Got three facing one way, one facing the other. Is this other than symmetric? I can stand in the center flagpole there and draw a straight line to the diagonal opposites, can I not? Therefore, by definitions, that is a symmetric arrangement, a symmetric formation. That the diagonal opposites, the 1 and 3 ladies are opposites, the 2 and 4 ladies, 1 and 3 gents, 2 and 4 gents, and so forth. Okay, we have a line, some kind of a line. It happens to be a 3 and 1, but it's going to be with a girls in the center line, boys on the end. How can I normalize this formation? Well, you could do a cycle and wheel if you're dancing events, but we're going to try to stick strictly with mainstream terminology. Tag the line would work, wouldn't it? I could tag the line face left and couples circulate and then be back to normal. We saw that earlier, didn't we? Everybody see how that would work? But say, beg pardon? Okay, tag the line, please. Face left and the couples Ferris wheel. And that's, again, a good flowing combination after a left-facing turn. It normalized the couples and it brought somebody into the center. Pass through, in the center only, obviously. Pass the ocean. And we have a real different situation here, don't we? What is this? A formation. Formation. Tidal wave. Is it a normal or half sachet or some other kind? Single hinge. What have we created? Very good. Couple single file circulate. All the boys run around the girls. Could I call a veer left from here? You could, but I don't recommend it because the girls just move to the right. They would have to change their body flow completely. Okay? For right now, since you come to a stop, please veer left and bend the line. Only for illustrative purposes. Pass the ocean. Different way of setting up a different 3-in-1 line. Swing through. Just the boys walk and dodge. And supposing, for sake of discussion now, you didn't want to do the same get out you had before, which was to tag the line, which way would we face to normalize? When boys are in the middle? If girls are in the middle, we turn to our left. If boys are in the middle, we turn to our beautiful. Boys run around the girls. Now at this point, we made a different 3-in-1, but there's somebody in between the three who are facing the same direction, aren't they? Can I do a tag the line from here? Sure, because the center dancers, as they face to the center, have a tendency to step forward. Everybody, for the sake of discussion, please do a U-turn back. If I call to tag the line from here, what would I expect to see? A bad situation. Why? Because the dancers in the center who wish to tag the line, to face to the center, would have a tendency to pass which shoulder? Does that tell you something about why we don't really let you use tag the line from ocean waves? Because in normal waves, the center's holding which hand? Therefore, never tag the line from a wave in which the centers are holding lefts. Do a U-turn back again, please. Now the centers are holding rights. They don't have that problem of failure to pass right shoulders by having to back up. It may not be desirable, but it is certainly permissible to do a tag the line from a 3-in-1 line where the centers are holding rights. Tag the line, please. Face to your left and a couple circulate and bend your line. And they're back to a normal line. Any other questions or things that you would like to see? These guys are super. Good.
And very patient.
Very patient.
One thing, two things really quick though. Don't be overwhelmed by the scenario that confronted you. we talked about recognizing the tidal wave, but realize that some of our locations can be multiple things. Everybody step to a tidal wave. But you notice, where did they just come out of? They came out of a line, which means that a line type call that's accessible can be done from there. Everybody step through, and the line reappeared. So don't suddenly feel that I have to apply a tidal wave type call to that setup. It's really 2 ocean waves that are end to end, so that's a scenario available. It's really a line of 4 or 2. And so you can get in and out of it by realizing that it has another label there. Let's do this real quick. Everybody bend the line and pass the ocean, and the girls in the middle walk and dodge. Now, we can also micromanage to get out of this. Head girls, do a U-turn back. Take your pick.
One of you is and one of you isn't.
Yes. Interestingly enough.
We kept everything symmetric, so it should be all right.
Right. And so with just having 2 girls turning around, depending on whether you can get them to, we normalized the ocean wave. And we got out of the 3-in-1 lines without having to imitate calls from another program. We got there without even having to really recognize an intricate position. We just simply had to have them identify themselves to go ahead and function. And I could have just as easily had a guy turn around as well. Yeah.
No, that's okay. Girls walk and dodge.
Yeah, too many callers.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
So that we have 3 facing one direction, 1 facing the other. Let's have the boys circulate while the girls trade. This is what I wanted. 3-in-1 line, the 1 person is facing out, 3 are facing in. Another easy get out that I see from here is to have the out-facing person, the 1 out-facing person, run to the right around 2 people. And look what I have. Girls slide over. Pass through. Bend your line. If the 1... In the 3-in-1 concept, you have 3 facing one direction, 1 facing the other. If the 1 person is facing out, it's a snap to get out of. You can run around 1, around 2, around 3.
Yeah, and more than 2 or 3, suddenly he's got more people dancing. He's not just dancing 4, he's dancing 6, he's dancing 8, and now we're all moving.
It's interesting to note that as we start to do this stuff, sometimes we see, geez, I saw it on something I thought was easier. I saw that 1 boy facing out, the other boy in the end, the 2 girls in the middle, both facing in. I could have had that end boy facing out, or the out facer, run around 1, and what did I create? Normal lines. I normalized the formation, I normalized the arrangement. The dancers win and say, that feels right. This is what we're trying to get at when we're talking about how do you manage formations. And I think it's important to realize that all the stuff we've done today, right here so far, has been with the mainstream terminology. Pass through and wheel and deal. What do I have here? What's the formation? It's a double pass through, starting double pass through. What is the arrangement? Girls in the middle. I could do something just with the girls, couldn't I? Girls square through 3/4. Boys reach out and courtesy turn that girl. What did I do? Normalize the formation. The ideas that you can come up with, the variety that you can create without putting in complexity is what we're striving to get. Is it easy for you as a caller? Not necessarily. You have a more limited vocabulary than if you're calling from the Plus or the Advanced or the Challenge program. The dancers have a limited vocabulary. You've got to use more work to create the variety. The tool that you have to do that is the formation management, the formation awareness, and how to get from one to the other. And in a moment of panic, as the squares begin to break, perhaps, normalize, get them in lines of 4 so you can say, everybody go forward and back, and they got everybody back dancing again. Yeah. Any other questions that we have out there? Certainly we haven't answered all your questions, I'm sure. But are there any other questions any of you have? I'm not going to keep you here if you don't want to ask any more questions. Again, I would urge you to pick up the flyers or the handouts as you go out. How about a hand for our dancers? And how about a hand for our panelists, Al Stevens and Mike Jacobs? Thank you very much, guys and gals. Question came up, are we all going to get rid of recycle? Let me just make a comment about recycle. A lot of times the girls don't like recycle because, in effect, they just do a circle in place.
Let me suggest to you, if you have dancers which are reaching for touching hands, have the centers in motion before you call the recycle. You get a better success. You also can do it having the center straight or what have you. Another thing that you can do very easily when you're dealing with recycles, just the boys cross-fold. Swing corner or whatever it happens to be, put them in the same setup. Just the boys do your part of a recycle. The boys have to think a little bit, but what is their part of a recycle? Nothing but a cross-fold. So we don't wear the girls out with an uncomfortable call, which is nothing but a circular pattern. It starts to open up some things to say, there's no reason for us to get rid of recycle. There's just reason for us as callers to learn how to use it better, more effectively. I have no problem with that, but you want to be careful that you can't say cycle and wheel unless you're dancing the advanced program. You can if you can do a recycle, others do a wheel and deal. I have no problem with that. Yeah, that would be a mainstream call. You know, we do centers cross run, new centers trade, and plus we call that a trade to wave, and advanced we call that mix. Same bloody action with different terminology. Not necessarily. In that case, I wouldn't have it. But see, it wouldn't be the girls doing a recycle anyhow. It would be those who can do a recycle. But, and again, if you're going to do a recycle from that kind of situation, if you do it one way, you're going to get one formation. If you do it another way, there's a little bit of debate as to who's going to be the inside and the outside, and you may end up back-to-back in a completed double pass-through. So it's the kind of thing of what are you going to expect them to do? What are they going to expect that you expect? So it's a whole new ballgame.